Hi, welcome to another episode of the Med Device Cyber Podcast. Today I'm here with a guest, Steve Curry. Steve works with project management, and project management is one of my favorite topics. I am a project manager, a PMP myself, project management professional, and I think our lives would greatly improve if we implemented some project management principles in our lives as well as our business and pretty much everything we do. So I'm excited to talk about project management today and tie it to cybersecurity because I feel like if people applied cybersecurity in a project management framework, we wouldn't have as many challenges as we do with medtech innovators getting roadblocked by cybersecurity because they forgot to put it in their project management plan. So welcome to the show, Steve. How's it going today?
Yeah, thanks for having me today, Christian. Appreciate it. Excited to be on the podcast and talking to your audience. So thanks for the invite.
Awesome. And where are you coming from today?
I'm based out of Westchester, Pennsylvania, beautiful suburb of Philadelphia.
All right. Awesome. Yeah, a friend of mine lives in Philadelphia. He says that they grow a lot of mushrooms in Philadelphia. Is that true?
I don't know. I don't know anything about that, perhaps.
All right, cool. And you're with MustardSeed. Can you tell us a little bit about MustardSeed and maybe the name and kind of what you do in medtech and a little bit about the background?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started MustardSeed 4 years ago with the idea that project management in the sciences needs to be better. So I really cut my teeth in the defense industry, working on big helicopter programs that were generally firm fixed price, $1 billion or $2 billion price tags associated with those programs. And so when you have large scale firm fixed price contracts, the project and program management best practices have to be good, or else your company might put lives in danger and or you may have a loss of a couple $100 million on that program, right? So the rigor was something that I took with me the rest of my career. Left that industry and went into the sciences. And in the sciences, I noticed project management best practices are infrequently utilized, and there was a real opportunity to make a difference for those scientists and innovators that are making a huge impact on our world. So I wanted to help where I could, and so the last 4 years we've been bringing on project managers, and we have been supporting medtech, biotech, and pharma companies in their developmental efforts, and it's been a lot of fun. So we've got a team of about 15 project managers today, supporting a little over a dozen clients in a variety of different ways.
Awesome. And where does the company name come from? It's a very unique name.
Yeah. So if you've ever seen mustard seeds, they're about the size of a grain of sand or even smaller. But they can grow as plants to be 8 or 9 feet tall if properly cared for. And so for me, that was an analogy of project management in the sciences where it's often overlooked. But if you know what you're looking at and properly integrated into your team, it can be a differentiator and an important part of what you're trying to do.
Awesome. Is that where mustard comes from? The mustard plants, actually? I don't even know.
Yeah, I believe so. Yep.
Okay. Cool.
I'm more of a mayonnaise guy, but yeah.
Awesome. I prefer horseradish. I used to live in Illinois where the horseradish capital of the world was. So yeah. Cool. And so you originally worked with the DoD. It sounds like with some of the big defense contracting. A lot of my experiences was in DoD as well, with project management also. What are some of the biggest challenges in medtech when it comes to project management, you feel like? I know you mentioned a lot of people just don't even consider it. Besides that, what are some of the bigger challenges?
Yeah, you're right. The first hurdle is just consideration. So we always say, plan the work and work the plan. So I'm not so bothered if you want to put that plan down in Smartsheet or in Microsoft Project or Primavera P6, or if you want to draw it in the dirt. It doesn't really matter as long as you think through what needs to happen in what order. That's really the critical piece there. So often teams say, well, we don't have a project manager. Let's take an organized, engineer and make them the project manager. That may or may not work. But the key is let's get down on paper what needs to happen when and who's responsible for those activities to make sure that we've got a comprehensive plan that's executable. And so we would call that an integrated master schedule. It's basically a schedule that outlines what everybody agrees the to-dos are and the timelines associated with those.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because I feel like a lot of med tech innovators don't really have, like you said, a project management plan. They just try to have somebody else do it, or like that's an engineer. But if you're going to set a timeline or a deadline, it's important to work backwards and see if you can actually hit that deadline with the resources, all the things you have to get done, like the work breakdown schedule. And I'm amazed by how many people that don't do that.
Yeah. Yeah. We call that the forward pass and the backwards pass, right? So the forward pass will be, let's schedule everything out as if we had plenty of time. And then the backwards pass would be, our investors are kicking dirt into this plan. We've got to shrink 8 months out of it. And then you figure out what you can do in parallel to make it work for the timeline that you have, right? But I would say most companies are not going through that exercise, but it's so critical because you could be, marching towards a plan that's either unachievable or that you haven't accounted for everything because you didn't write it down in the first place. And I think, as you and I have got to know each other better over the last year, that's what our conversations are centered around, which is an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And how do we make sure that things like cybersecurity, regulatory, all these sort of items that everybody knows need to be taken care of, by focusing on one at a time, it really can set yourself up for extended runway and timelines that are not met.
Yeah, I think we're both on a similar mission in terms of raising the awareness, because a lot of medtech innovators forget about cybersecurity until the very end, like 2 months before a pre-market submission. And we're trying to raise the awareness that says to let them know, like, if you consider this earlier on, it'll be less frustrating, less costly, and your time to market will improve. So that's like one of our core missions, is to raise that awareness. And I think from a project management perspective, it's probably very similar, because I think if you're managing or not really managing properly a big project, such as bringing a product to market, it's going to cost a lot more than if it were managed properly.
That's right. It's kind of like what these founders and CEOs in medtech are trying to do is incredibly difficult. And in some cases, the technology doesn't exist to accomplish that task in the near future, right? So the only chance there is of achieving the end state of commercializing this product is by doing the easy or simple tasks well and without much effort, right? So you may say, well, cybersecurity is not easy or simple. But could it be? Could it be by integrating it in early in your planning when you've developed the full schedule, cybersecurity is accounted for, there's a subject matter expert that you're in constant communication with? That's a much easier path than getting a few months from FDA submittal and realizing we've got to backtrack a little bit and figure this out, right? Then it's difficult. So I think as these companies kind of sprout out of academia or of just great ideas, I just encourage founders to think, what's the best team I can put in place to make sure that this goes as well as possible? Because if we do the simple things and make them challenging, we will not have inertia to do the challenging items. And there's certainly going to be challenges along the way, right? So by doing the easy things easily, it allows us the inertia, the time, the money, the resources to execute those difficult tasks when they do come up.
I like that analogy and that philosophy, because there's only so much energy and resources, and if we waste it on, like you said, the simple things because we don't have it managed properly, then we don't have the inertia to handle the more complex things. I think that's excellent. I think also it's more of a philosophy of mine, but I believe like project management should be something we apply to our lives in general. We have an outcome we want to seek. We reverse engineer the outcome, and we have steps we have to take, and we block off our calendar and set up the time and the resources to accomplish those things. And I think if more people actually approach their life through that lens, they would make more progress. What do you think about that?
Yeah, 100%. Starting your day with a to-do list, clearing your items from the day before, keeping a clean email inbox. Those are some simple things that everybody can do, even if you're not a project manager. And those really make a difference over time. And it makes it more fun, right? Startups are difficult. They're very challenging. And it's not a whole lot of fun if we're making it harder than it needs to be. And so I would just encourage people to think about, do we have the right team and resources in place to make sure that we execute this as easily and best as possible?
Yeah, I was talking to an investor not long ago, and they said in their portfolio, 7 out of 100 startups in medtech succeed. That's 7%. And I wonder, and I think it's shifting, that investors are now starting to look at cybersecurity to see if a medtech innovator has on the roadmap, because that's the reason a lot of them aren't succeeding. And I wonder if they're actually looking at project management on that roadmap to see if the innovator actually has a project management framework in place. Have you noticed that?
It's a great point. We've been talking to more investors in the last 6 to 9 months than we have in the past 4 years. So I think they are starting to look at that, and their capital is valuable, and they've got lots of options. And I think a project management framework, or phrased another way, an execution framework, is really got to be critical as we move forward, right? If these organizations are putting millions on the line, they certainly want to understand, how's the team going to accomplish this? What's the structure of the organization? Do you have the right consultants and employees, not just employees, but consultants supporting as well? Because it's a team sport, and we have to make sure that we have the right team in place to do that. So I think you're right. Investors are starting to pay attention to the execution side. I talk about project management. What we're talking a lot about is helping these companies execute. And it's kind of, project management has, in some circles, a negative connotation of, well, they just schedule meetings and take meeting minutes and things like that. But what a project management office really should be doing is operating from the ground level. Like, yes, they're planning the schedules, they're driving the schedules, holding people accountable, and then they're bubbling up that data so that decision making can be occurring on a regular basis, either through dashboards or meetings. The data is for decision making, and the more easily the leadership team can make those decisions, the more successful the company's going to be. So it's really that entire ecosystem, and without a project management office or even a project manager, each function is really challenged to integrate with the other functions and other consultants on their own, and that's asking a lot. So we have seen a shift towards the venture capital world starting to lean on PMO support more.
Interesting. And you brought up a good point. We have a client that has a project manager on their side, and we have a project manager on our side. And there's a little bit of tension periodically, because their project manager wants to have meetings all the time just to get minor updates. And I think, like you alluded to, if you have like poor project management, it gets a bad reputation, and people almost want to like steer away from project management. And I think it's because people maybe don't know how to manage the project efficiently, or don't have the right tools in place. But we would have these meetings like with 20 people on there to get like a 30-second update on something. And when you think about the waste of resources, it's kind of ridiculous. So we've tried to manage their project manager and say, okay, if there's a little update, you can send us a Slack message and we can tell you like the status of this particular deliverable through Slack message, and filter through one person versus have 8 people on a call. How do you manage those situations with your team?
Yeah, it's a it's a good point. There's a phrase I heard once when someone was talking about an ineffective project manager. They said, "With help like that, who needs help?" And I think that's very true for a lot of experiences that folks have with project managers. I mean, project management is a job just like any other, where there's excellent operators and there's some folks that haven't treated it as a career path. And so if if the listeners out there say, I have a project manager, I don't know if I'm really getting the value out of it, I would say it's probably just not the right person, or they just don't have the right training in place. But don't give up on the function. The function is likely very critical. Really high end project managers, to your point about how long it takes to get status. The difference isn't just, all right, I pay a junior project manager X and a senior project manager Y. That's the cost difference. The cost difference is really the 20 people on the 30-minute meeting every week, every other week that slows everything down. Like that's the cost difference. And so I would just encourage people to expect more from their project management function, because what it should be is an indispensable part of your team that you really can't live without.
I agree with that. Um, what do you think about the certification of project management professional? In general, I would say I'm not like a big advocate of certifications. I will say that was one of the hardest ones I've ever done, and I've probably done like 30 certifications. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah. So I've been PMP certified for almost 15 years now, and I think it's important for project managers to kind of go through that and to show their commitment to the profession. I've seen very good project managers that do not have the certification, so it's not a requirement for us for hiring. But it does show that level of commitment. But I've also seen people that have PMP certifications that are not very good at managing projects. So
Right.
It's certainly not an indicator of proficiency, in my opinion. But it does show a commitment to the role.
Cool. And with cybersecurity, when you take on an engagement, when does cybersecurity enter that project plan, or does it typically, or how does that even happen?
Yeah, it's a great question. Usually too late, or when we bring it up, right? So we get engaged.
Like you often bring it up. The client doesn't bring it up?
On occasion, depending, because there's a lot of companies we deal with that are not, pure med tech, like gonna be in a hospital, right? It might be a little bit more medical technology, or for research purposes. So yeah, it does depend, but a lot of cases it's coming up that, all right, we're 6 months out from submittal. Let's start to talk more about it. And I think in some cases they can get away with it, right? But in a lot of cases it might require redesign or things like that. So I would say that if we look at kind of the engineering design cycle, I would just encourage more and more companies to, even if it's just one item that they look at early on the process before the first phase gate review, if they have a phase gate process, that there's a line item in there to make sure they have it accounted for either internally, or they've met with a consultant or two and they've got a clear path forward. It's going back to that prevention versus cure piece, right? And it's really important to make sure that the timelines are not extended unnecessarily. What they're doing is difficult, and we've got to make sure that we have all the scope accounted for. And cybersecurity, unfortunately, has been one of those that falls down at the bottom of the list, at least in my experience.
Yeah, one of the challenges I notice is a lot of people try to consider cybersecurity in a block of time, kind of like a biocompatibility study, whereas cybersecurity is really an iterative process that should be considered throughout the life cycle of the product, not just a chunk of time on a in a quarter or 2 month block window. And I think that is like one of the biggest hurdles a lot of people don't understand. And from a project management perspective, I think organizations try to say, okay, we're going to do cybersecurity like this quarter towards the end of our product versus realizing it needs to be iterative.
Yeah, absolutely. There's the iterative part of project management is agile, right? But you can still have a waterfall schedule that's finish to start type relationships, Gantt chart, things people are used to seeing that has both agile and waterfall components in it. But you have to have the entire scope outlined. If you had a work breakdown structure at the beginning, a lot of companies don't. But if you were to have a proper scoping document of what needs to be done, experienced teams are going to have the cybersecurity component outlined in there. And if they do have a proper phase gate process, 4 or 5 steps, each phase should include a cybersecurity component to it. And that should be a forcing function along the journey to make sure that, phase 1, it's considered. Phase 2, it's in design. Phase 3, it's in development, and so on.
Yeah, I agree. What does a typical engagement look like when a prospect engages with you and you come on board? Like, what does that look like typically?
Yeah, it depends on the size of the organization. Larger organizations utilize us to upskill their current teams. Smaller organizations, mid-sized groups, maybe 200 employees or less, generally look to us to outsource the function. So we'll set up a project management office for them. And most times there's not a project management software in place. So we will make a recommendation based on what they're working on and the outline of their team. And then we would implement that software and put all the schedules in place and roll that up into dashboards. And so it's really a centralized hub, kind of like a heartbeat of the organization, right? One beating heart, that all the schedules are project based, but they can also easily be toggled to be functionally based. So it's easy to digest, but at the same time, it rolls up for the C-suite and they can provide board of director updates easier. And that's really key. All this work is happening today. It's just taking, mostly it's top heavy. It's the C-suite working a lot of hours to put together board pitches and to figure out exactly what the team's progress looked like last week. We try and simplify all that. Once that's in place, it's working the plans, right? So if we did have to develop schedules, we would have done that, put those in the software tool. And it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun being efficient and helping companies go from point A to point B. That's what we're good at.
What software is like your preference for project management?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'll flip it back to you with a trivia question. I have looked at what I think are all the different software options for project management out on the market over the last 3 years. How many do you think are available that I found?
Well, some of them are, from my experience, some of them are really task management versus project management. So if you're actually talking about project management, I would say a dozen.
Yeah. So if we include the task management ones, the project management.
If we include the task management, there's probably 50 decent ones.
So we've looked at, I think the number is 120 today.
Okay.
that we've looked at. So there's probably 20 or 30 task management ones, as you mentioned. There's dozens of projects and portfolio. So really, there's a lot of options, and that's problematic because if you're a 50-person med tech company, you need a project management software, even if you don't have a project manager. So what do? Well, the Monday.com ads are relentless. So we'll give them a shot, right? Or we've got some engineers that like Jira. We'll base the entire company system off of Jira, neither of which are probably the best approach. I would say for most medtech companies, I would actually make the recommendation of Smartsheet. Smartsheet is it's user-friendly enough for companies that are getting started, but at the same time, you can grow with it for years. There are more high-powered software options out there, but the barrier to entry on those is significant. Cost, implementation time, usability once you have it. Those I would say, unless you're a few hundred employees or more, I would say you do not need to spend that sort of time and money. So yeah, for that reason, it's an imperfect system like all of them, in my opinion, but Smartsheet works for more than most.
Okay, cool. I used to use Smartsheets in the past. Right now we use Asana, which is more task management. It does have a feature to show some Gantt charts and dependencies and other things now finally, but that's what we use because I've have experience with Asana for many years and just the learning curve has already been accomplished.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. It's hard to switch systems. And that's why it's a big decision because once you get everything loaded in, you've probably been frustrated, but it's loaded, your schedules are loaded in and then you're used to it. It's like, okay, we'll go with that. But a lot of those task management software options teams grow out of. And that's the challenge with those, right? Is some of those, once you get schedules that have 200 line items in them, 300 line items in them, they're just not very usable. And that becomes a real challenge. So, yeah, it's a difficult landscape out there, but encourage folks to just be diligent about that first decision because you probably stuck with it a little bit longer than you realize.
Yeah, because we've got templates in Asana. We've had to add features to it, customize it, add the portfolio feature, all those things. So like you said, it's super hard to switch if you wanted to switch to something else at this point. And my whole team knows how to use it.
That's right.
Yeah, because Smartsheets might be a I don't know if it'd be better or not because we have to do all the same work, customize and everything, and teach my team how to use it. But yeah, I think your point is be wise about what you choose because you're going to be sort of stuck with it for a while.
Yeah. And that becomes, that's my recommendation today. But all these companies make changes. And in a year, my recommendation may change. So I think that's where it becomes difficult for small to mid-sized teams that have one project manager and they rely on that one project manager to either accept the software option that was chosen before them or to choose one. That's a lot to ask. And so when founders and CEOs are building these teams of employees and consultant contractors, I'd really just encourage them to think, how do I get the best team in here? Because if we're relying on one project manager to pick the right project management software, implement it, use it to its fullest extent, review the latest on AI to make sure they're as efficient as possible while doing their day job, that's a lot to ask of one person that might be spread thin. So is there a better way to fulfill those needs? And I think, cyber's the same thing in my book is that's a lot to ask of a cybersecurity professional at a med tech company is to keep up with the industry as much as they would need to. And they just wouldn't have the reps that a company like Blue Goat would.
Yeah. Well, we focus on specific things. Plus we have a team, one person can't do everything. Right. And like, even on my team, one person can't do everything. We have people that specialize in specific things for a 510K submission as an example. It's interesting. We're talking about Smartsheets and Asana. Like one of the largest clients of ours, a publicly traded company, they use Excel for their project management. And it is like not efficient at all. It's linked to all these other documents on a Google Drive. And it's, I don't know. I guess they chose that and they're stuck with it at this point, but it'd be hard to maybe change. But it just seems like it's very antiquated way of doing things. I imagine you've seen similar.
Absolutely. Excel is kind of everyone's default these days, which is interesting because 15 years ago the standard was Microsoft Project. And I think Microsoft just hasn't really invested in the Microsoft Project brand that much. There's certain iterations that are web-based now, but they certainly have not been aggressive about evolution of that standard software package from 10 15, 20 years ago. And so Microsoft Excel is just kind of everyone's default. And I would be, I'd actually would imagine that there's probably a very expensive software, project management software at that publicly traded company that just is too difficult to use, which is why they're using Excel, right? So that's another challenge is if you over purchase a project management software that the project managers don't have proper training or don't know how to use or they're not encouraged to use, then the challenge becomes, well, not everyone's using it. And if not everyone's using the software, then it defeated the purpose of getting the higher end software to begin with.
Yeah, that's the challenge we have sometimes in my company with Asana is, like you said, people have to use it. So if we're expecting updates, then the person working on a specific deliverable needs to make sure they update that. Otherwise, we have inefficient project management. And I have a project manager reaching out to that person via Slack or phone call or some other method versus them just updating the project management software. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's creative ways to do that now, either with, an integration tool like Zapier, or there's some other ways to get inputs from the team in Slack and get that integrated into your project management software so that it's less of a burden for them to log in and remember their password and fill that out, right? So there's some creative solutions for teams that need it. The technology is kind of endless as long as you have a little bit of time and expertise to think through what's the best way for this team to provide status. That's super useful because that is, as you've mentioned more than once today, it's a time suck. It really takes away from the work that the engineers and scientists are working on. And it really needs to be focused on their subject matter. And we do need to extract the information from them, but we need to do it almost in the most painless way possible. And that's how a project management office gains credibility, is by giving time back to those that they work with.
100%. And maybe I'm just obsessed with efficiency, but when I see meetings with 20 or 30 people and half the people are in every meeting and their mic is on mute and they're off camera, I'm thinking, what are these people actually doing? And then I calculate in my head, what's the average salary of everyone in this meeting and how many people are in this meeting? This meeting lasted for an hour. So this meeting actually costs this much money. And I wonder if you probably do this and I do this, if we're like the exception, like everyone else just thinks this is normal, day to day. But I'm thinking, what is the opportunity cost share of all these people in this meeting where we could do this much more efficiently? I don't know. Maybe just a few of us think that way and everyone else just assumes that that's just normal operations. I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. And we do that with clients. Not everyone, but a number of them, where once a year, twice a year, we'll do math on the meetings and look at all the meetings we have, do meeting hygiene, do the cost per meeting, and see where we can lean folks out. And so we'll work with our sponsors and C-suite and say, we're the co-pilots here. You're the pilots, but what do you think about this data? And do you want us to run these meetings differently? And I think
that's brilliant because we have an ROI calculator we use in our discovery deck when we do discovery calls to show the cost if a device is delayed to market due to cybersecurity delays, and it really kind of opens people's eyes because a lot of people don't understand the numbers until you put it in front of them. And I think that what you're doing with meetings is awesome. I'd like to see more of that in the industry and in general in business. You mentioned meeting hygiene. I think I know what you mean by that. Would do you mind to explain that to everyone?
Yeah. It's both attendees. So do we have too many people in these meetings? Because sometimes that can creep up, right? It's all right. This is a core team of 6 of us, but then one meeting we needed this other person, so they got invited to that specific meeting, but then they came to all the rest, and then all of a sudden it's a 14-person meeting, right? And so it's just a checkpoint occasionally, maybe quarterly or twice a year, once a year, to say, all right, has this spiraled out of control? Do we have the right functions involved? Should there be mandatory and optional attendees, and it's up to the project manager to just invite selectively depending on the agenda for that week. It becomes really important and can save organizations quite a bit of time, because I think most professionals agree that sit in a lot of meetings, and the more time we can give back to the subject matter experts, the more they can accomplish in a given day or week.
100%. I have this theory because in one of our clients, there's a person in every single meeting, and they're on mute, they're off camera, and I've intentionally asked, say, hello, so and so, how's it going? Nothing. And someone in my company said a lot of people today will work 6 jobs or 4 jobs, and they'll have like 4 laptops, and they'll be in all 4 meetings at the same time, but they never say anything. So, or if someone calls them, they have to jump to another meeting. And I hope that's not what's going on, but I didn't even realize that was something people are doing today. But I guess you can get away with it if you don't have that good meeting hygiene as you were talking about.
Yeah, certainly possible. I haven't seen that either, but I imagine that there's a little bit of that goes on. The organizations we work with are way too busy for anyone to hide. It's usually a matter of everyone's just trying to do their best, but they're completely maxed out, and they don't want to be disrespectful to the team leader or the project manager if they need to be there, but maybe they don't need to be there every single meeting. So it's a balancing act for sure.
Yeah. What would you say, like, the top 3 misconceptions about project management with medtech innovators you've noticed?
Yeah. So I think a lot of times medtech innovators are in a tough spot. So, the funds that they have at their disposal are limited. And so they generally spend those funds on SME roles, people that are supposed to do a given task or given role. And so the project management often falls between the cracks, falls to the founder, it's himself or herself, or goes to a very organized member of the team who can carry the torch for a period of time. So I feel for them, because that's a difficult spot. I would just encourage them to think that the funds that they were given are funds for progress, and the best chance at progress they have is to properly plan and schedule the work. So there's not a whole lot of options. If you back up a few years ago, the options were, do we hire or do we not? And now with a ton of fractional talent or outsourced companies like MustardSeed, there's more options. And so that is an advantage for today's medtech innovators. So I would say, just encourage folks to think outside the binary box of, do I hire or do I wait to hire for that position? So that's certainly one. Another one is that, project managers don't really move the needle. And I'd say that's a misconception that's certainly been earned by the industry or by the function of project management. But we can do better. And in pockets, there's teams of people that are doing really good work. So I would encourage folks just to be very selective, because just like not all cyber professionals are the same, not all project managers are the same. So, I would, if folks have had a bad experience, I would encourage them just to continue to look and be very selective about who you're added to your team.
Yeah, I like what you said about hiring versus not hiring or waiting to hire. I think, as an entrepreneur myself, I would rather outsource my accounting function to a team that costs less, actually, than hiring one individual, because now I have a team of experts. I have a bookkeeper, an accountant, a fractional CFO, and they have back-end support, versus me hiring one individual to try to do all of that, which is kind of a recipe for disaster, because a CFO role is different than an accounting role, different than a bookkeeping role, right? So I'd rather outsource that function until my company's large enough where I can hire all 3. And I think as a med tech startup, I think that's probably a smarter way of looking at things, at least initially, Because if you hire a cybersecurity professional, they're not going to know as much as a team of professionals. Same thing with project management. And the risk is greater there too when you hire somebody, because now they're on payroll and the cost is more versus for somebody fractional or a contracted individual.
Yeah. Yeah. And back to your point on ROI, I mean, we talk to clients all the time, and sometimes they're hesitant to move forward. And I would generally, the rule of thumb we use is the project management time needed is generally between 2 and 5% of total employee/consultant time. So if you have 100 employees, depending on how innovative the work you're doing is, you may need between 2 and 5 project managers to support that team. Probably on the lower end, probably closer to 2 or 3%. But if you're a 25-person medtech company, what do? That's still less than one person. And so now there's options for fractional or outsourced. You can hit that number just right, while not overpaying, or maybe you pay the same, but you get 3 times the output as you might by bringing someone internal. So I say that because it's a situation where if you're spending an extra 2% on a project manager, you expect 2% of savings. Well, 2% on a medtech innovation is it could be a couple of weeks, right? But a good project manager is going to save you a couple months. And I would imagine the calculus is very similar for cybersecurity. The ROI is not very high for the project manager or the cyber professional to make up for the cost of that individual.
That's right. And we can certainly facilitate bringing things to market much faster and much more cost effective than hiring somebody. And that we know that's what we're competing with as well, that decision. Awesome. Well, we're almost up on time here. So any last minute words of wisdom for our audience?
Yeah, I would just say that it's all about execution in 2025 and beyond, right? So how do we set up the teams to execute the best? Let's not settle for mediocre if it's personnel or if it's planning. There's a lot of great ideas out there, and the ones that are winning and will win are the ones that are executing the best. And so the way I look at it is that's proper planning and scheduling and then managing to that schedule. There's a lot of risk management improvements that kind of need to be made in the industry. And that's not super complicated. Risk management, everyone knows they need to do it. Venture capital always says we got to de-risk this, right? That's about the one line that comes out of their mouth every few minutes. And so, yeah, being able to execute well is a differentiator. And I would just say for those out there that might be struggling a little bit, just feel free to hold your teams accountable, or find folks that meet your expectations.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Steve, for being a guest on our podcast. We appreciate your time today. And thanks so much for everyone for tuning in, and we hope to see you on the next episode.